You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments below. Be sure to smash that like button. So a few years ago, we got to know attorney Don Jackson as he was helping Kristian Fulton attain his eligibility or regain his eligibility. And LSU has called on Don Jackson once again now that John Emery is ineligible, being declared that by the NCAA. And Attorney Jackson is good enough to spend a couple of minutes with us here. Attorney Jackson, Don, thanks so much for the time. How are you?
Just fine. Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. We appreciate the time. Can we just start maybe with a little bit of a timeline? Because there's a lot of people listening who were very surprised by the news a week ago that John Emery was ineligible and are trying to play a little bit of catch-up.
Well, I think he was equally surprised, as was his family. As I understand it, the university filed a waiver. Well, this really goes back much further than that. As a result of all of the things that have happened over the last 18 months with COVID, the young man and his family have just had an extraordinarily difficult time. And that resulted in him not meeting continuing eligibility requirements as far as the NCAA is concerned. During that period, his mother contracted COVID, his stepfather contracted COVID, and as a result of that was hospitalized for an extended period of time and still having ongoing difficulties. The young man's grandmother died after a lengthy bout with cancer. It's just been a very difficult time. Most recently, as a result of the hurricane, the family's home was flooded. So they had an extraordinary number of issues that have adversely impacted the family, and these are all mitigating factors as far as the waiver was concerned. He wound up 3 credit hours short of continuing eligibility requirements. Well, we want to contextualize that a little bit. This past summer, the young man was an honor student, made extraordinary grades, and he was limited in the number of credit hours that he could take during the summer session. Had he been able to take the 3 additional credit hours, he would have been eligible. Well, NCAA legislation allows schools to pursue a waiver of continuing eligibility requirements of mitigating factors that resulted in a student athlete not being able to meet those requirements. This situation is a textbook example of the reason as to why waivers like that are granted. The university filed for a waiver, continuing eligibility waiver form, and that waiver was denied. There have been 2 appeals that were filed, and those appeals were both rejected. Well, I got involved on Sunday. Keith Fulton, Kristian Fulton's father, referred the family to me, and as a result of that, I got involved. Anytime you have a waiver denial or any kind of adverse decision by the NCAA, whether it's a drug testing issue, an initial eligibility issue, or continuing eligibility issue, you can always submit new information and reopen that. And that was my reason for being retained and associated in this case. It's our goal to provide the information that's needed to contextualize the difficulty that he's faced as a student athlete. Hopefully we'll be able to satisfy the NCAA and get him back on the field in fairly short order.
Don, was that information, the contextualization, not included in the waiver?
It was rejected, but we are providing additional information, additional documentary support to what's already been submitted, in virtually the same way that we did in Kristian Fulton's case several years ago.
Okay. Attorney Don Jackson is our guest. What is some of that new information that was not included in the waiver?
It's really more detailed because the university wasn't aware of it. So it's essentially a more detailed analysis of the issues that will include statements from family members, statements from other people that had knowledge of the young man's difficulty that may not have been available to the university the first time around.
What about the objection that some have said that, well, you knew, I guess, last fall or spring that he was going to be these credit hours short. Why couldn't you address it then?
Well, the reality of the matter is I don't think anyone really knew about that, because I'm not sure how much information people really had regarding the issues in his family. Some of the issues have been addressed in the media already. There was a considerable amount of media coverage of his stepfather's illness. The stepfather's a minor league manager, and some of that was included the first time around, and some of it was publicly available. There are other things that were not publicly available that we're attempting to provide at this point.
Got it. You have obviously been down this road so many times with the NCAA in so many different cases. What kind of precedent exists for a situation similar? I know no two cases are exactly the same, but is there precedent, or what kind of precedent exists for John Emery to have a favorable result and to be back on the field this fall?
Considerable precedent. I mean, several years ago, I was involved with an athlete from Manhattan College. He was a soccer player that came over from Great Britain. The NCAA denied. They actually took 2 seasons of competition away from him, 2 years of eligibility when he came into the United States. So at the end, midway during his second year of eligibility, which he thought was going to be his final year of eligibility, the family wound up getting involved. His father was a former English Premier League soccer player. The family wound up getting involved and provided additional information to contextualize the adverse decision. And he got those 2 years of eligibility back at Manhattan College, and a number of other issues. I mean, student athletes that have transferred, they were denied transfer waivers for one reason or the other. Additional contextualization was provided. After that was provided, the waiver was granted. There's considerable precedent for a reevaluation of earlier decisions and a reversal of those earlier decisions, even right down to situations, for example, involving student athletes that have failed drug tests, been suspended for a year, and additional information was provided, not through an appeal, but through a reconsideration of the facts. And when that additional contextualization was provided, they were given their eligibility back and went out on the field and field, court, or pitch and performed during that season. And we're optimistic and hopeful that we'll get a similar decision by the NCAA. And the other issue here is, and we're certainly hoping not to project that far ahead, by providing that new information, if that information is rejected by the NCAA staff, he would then be able to appeal that decision to an appeal subcommittee with a more complete factual support, with more complete factual support of the mitigating grounds for waiver.
One more for you, and your time always appreciated. What about a timeline moving forward? The season's obviously 2 weeks old with 10 weeks to go. So what's a realistic timeline here for John Emery to have a decision by the NCAA to see if he can get back on the field?
Realistically, we don't anticipate that that's going to happen by this weekend. The best case scenario, we're able to submit documentation by the end of this week. If that happens, the case would be docketed for next week. It would be submitted to the NCAA staff for consideration, and if necessary, documented for an appeal next week. And the best case scenario would be the student athlete, family, university favorable decision in time for him to be on the field by the opening game of the SEC schedule.
We'll certainly hope for that, and we hope for a favorable decision for John Emery to get back on the field. Attorney Don Jackson, we always appreciate a couple of minutes. Know you're very busy. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.